Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot, and today we are once again going to fly the almighty Boeing 747 from the Aircraft and Avionics update number 2. The AAU-2 has just seen its first update, and I'm sure many of you have seen my video with the Boeing 787 already. Well, I kinda neglected the 747 a little bit over the 87, but here we go, back in the Queen of the Sky once more. So, the setup for today is a flight that Lufthansa is actually operating from time to time in real life on 747s, which is Frankfurt to Palma de Mallorca. Now, today we are planned with 364 holiday makers on board, and they are bringing about 9.1 tons of cargo. I've already loaded the airplane up, and we are pretty much all set up in terms of the airplane's load and fuel. Now, today I am also using the FTSIM Plus sound pack for the 747, so if it doesn't sound the exact same way like yours does, then well, that is the reason. Overall, and most importantly after all, Working Title is developing those aircraft to a standard where they do want them to get modded by third parties in the aftermath. Okay, with the pre-word said and done, let's head right into the airplane and start setting it up. Again, my Boeing 747 procedures might be a little bit rusty over here, so apologies for that. So, just like in the 787, the 747 has gotten a new options menu, which I quickly want to have a look into. We find that via the index and then the settings page. Up here we can choose between the navigation display in track up or heading up modes and the IRS alignment time, which for this video I've set to realistic instead of accelerated in the previous 787 video or instant. What's also new is that we can see the alignment time on the navigation display up here. Okay, apart from that, we are using the non-modded standard 747 over here. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward the FMC setup a little bit so that it doesn't get too boring for you guys. And that is our FMC setup complete, so let's go ahead with the remainder of our flight deck. And we want our anti-ice all in the auto position, and that's this. Fuel pumps can remain off for now, as the APU will have its own if it needs to. Fire tests not simulated yet, but I'm sure that they will be added at a later point. And that's pretty much that part. So let's go ahead with the MCP. $4,000 is the initial climb, 177 gonna be the heading, and the rest of it. Ready. To go, LNAV and VNAV. We're flying in hectopascals today, using the B key to align my altimeters. Let's see how that thing is going to turn out and if it is properly as it should. Okay, 1020 hectopascals. Interestingly enough, this one seems to be synchronized. Oh, forget what I just said. I pressed the B key, so obviously it synchronized itself. It did what it was supposed to do. Okay, and that is pretty much most of our flight deck setup completed here. Just going to enter a random squawk. I like seeing not always the same numbers over there. Okay, so that is that part completed. You can see the IRS is still in the alignment mode, so that covers that. So let's go ahead and do a real quick departure briefing over here. That's for the departure. We don't really have any, so let's go ahead with the route check. Echo Delta, Delta Foxtrot, Lima Echo Papa Alpha, Lufthansa 5 Lima Alpha, routing via Neki, Yankee 163 Heavy, Yankee 164 Mopon, Lutex, Spenot, Nemos, Geneva, Inco Spalzi, Upper November 852 Ferzo, and should be Lunik for the Lunik arrival, and that's it. This should have been Upper Lima 129. Why did it lose that? Looks like it doesn't want to let me copy and paste that. Okay, well, we better erase it. That seems to be an issue there, that it loses the last airway. But I know there's a couple waypoints on there. However, ATC usually gives you directs in that region, so I'm quite happy with it. Also interesting here, normally the plan mode should work even if the IRS is not aligned yet, so that's probably a little bug there. Okay then. Left to take off, runway 18, flaps 10, noise abatement 2, and the takeoff is going to be left seat with PAX auto bleeds on. In fact, we cannot even select the PAX off. Okay, so that's that. Emergencies, we'll take them standard as we've briefed them in the crew room on the way to the aircraft, and then going ahead with our briefing. Push back to the left-hand side there, and then it's going to be taxi out straight at November 8, the right turn onto November for full length of the departure. Okay, our sit then is going to be the Aneki 1 Lima departure, and we've got that on here. FMC, runway 18, Aneki 1 Lima, routing straight at on the runway track to 800 feet, then to Reed VOR, and thereafter onto Aneki. Speed limit is 220 by Reed, and for the setup then, you can see it's automatically tuned Reed VOR there, as it's part of our route, and you can see that indicated by the little R you have down here. So the VOR has been tuned automatically, we don't need to put anything in manually. However, for the sake of it, I am going to enter it manually on the left-hand side, and then we'll see how it's going to behave compared to the right-hand side when we depart as a little test there. And that's pretty much it. So that completes our briefing. Also, a very quick look here at the FMC com pages. We can see we've got the data link no com message. If we look down at radio number 3, if we just take it up over here, we can see there is no data tuning on any of those. And likewise, if you go to the pages, you can see that we can insert the winds manually, but we cannot uplink any of them. ATC button here shows you the lock-on page. However, as far as I'm aware, this is inoperative and not be able to lock on to anything. Okay, so that is pretty much our preparation there completed. One thing I did notice during the FMC setup, you might have seen me struggle a little bit with it, is that when I loaded my plane by default, by simply dragging and dropping the weather slider, sorry, not the weather, but the payload sliders, we ended up with a center of gravity that was so far forward, with those 5% Mach over here, that the airplane was actually totally out of trim. So I had to play with the sliders manually in order to get our CG to a decent position, like it is right now at 24%, and that provides us with a decent takeoff trim setting as well. Okay then, one more minute until our IRS is ready. Let's go ahead and start up the APU, and let's get GSX to get us a pushback tug. And as GSX is doing so, it is going to remove the jetway, and you will see that we've got some operable doors in the airplane. And they've already closed the first exit that we had open, and now we see the slides and manual indications over here. And by the time we start a pushback, those should hopefully change to slides into automatic, which then means the slides are armed. Okay, let's go ahead and read the pre-flight checklist. Emergency light switch, guarded and closed.
Captain, we are ready for pushback.
And we've got the nav light switch. That's on. Looks a little strange, that position. Logo light switch, off. Flight director switch. On. Auto throttle arm switch. On. And seatbelt selector.
Departure
on.
check completed. Light has been inserted.
Pre-flight checklist complete. Okay, the timing is just about right. The IRS has finished aligning, so we are fully set up for our departure. All that remains to do is to wait for GSX, as pretty much always. Okay, we want to push back, let's say to area 5.
Locking gear.
Lifting up the plane over here.
Release parking brakes.
Okay then, we are ready to go. The hydraulic pumps can still not be moved into the aux position, unfortunately, so we are just going to put them all on auto for the pushback. Also, we have the APU generators available, so we're going to switch them on, and the external power is going to disconnect automatically by the time we start our push. Okay, the packs, unfortunately, we cannot turn off. So that's just how it is. At the moment, the switches are not operable yet. However, I do hope that that's going to come with a future update. In case you notice a frame rate drop, then welcome to the world of GSX. Okay, trim is set at 4.9 units, which is what we need before start checklist. Transponder panel set, taker speed set, taker trim set, altimeter set, taxi and takeoff briefing completed, beacon light switch both, and engine bleeder switches
Release parking brakes.
on. Before start checklist complete, park and brake is off.
Commencing push. All engines clear. Start at will.
Okay, starting the pushback. And as said, those incredibly low frame rates are just a byproduct of GSX. So that is nothing to worry about in terms of our... So pushing back, the external powers should become unavailable any moment, latest by the time we leave our stand, as far as I'm aware. Also, as we are flying a 747, always a good thing here to check the ICAS messages you have to make sure that there is no fuel tank to engine message on it, which would indicate that you have configured the fuel system incorrectly. Okay then, we are good to go. Is X starting to turn us around? You will notice here in Frankfurt there are all those little numbers marked on the apron down here. A little bit hard to read right now because apparently Microsoft Flight Simulator cannot really cope with the huge size of the aircraft, so you will notice that with any big aircraft that things might become blurry. However, here we have them, and those basically indicate pushback areas that we have all over the apron. So over there are more, and so on. So that's just something, if you're wondering where GSX is pushing us, then we selected area 5, so it's probably pushing us to area 5. Up here you can see, for example, area 7. Okay, so let's go ahead and start up our engines. 3 and 4. Auto start. We're going to start the timer. Oh, that does not look very healthy down there. Good job, GSX. Very good job. You know what? You might as well just stop the pushback here.
Set parking brake.
Cockpit to ground. We have a good engine.
And we've got to roll your symmetry caution there. That is probably GSX messing something over, because that should not normally come up. Okay, look over here how the hydraulic brake pressure indicator has just increased. So that's probably because the left hydraulic systems are being powered up right now. Quite nice to see that stuff like this is simulated in the background. Let's see, can we bring up the hydraulic page? Yep, that's all 4 systems running over here.
Left is clear, right is clear.
Okay, then you're clear to disconnect. Clear signal on the right hand side with a pin, and have a good day. Bye bye. Okay, that's 4 engines running. Engine generators come on automatically. Packs are still on. Let's go ahead and run the flight control track. Full up, full down, neutral, full left, full right, neutral, and the rudders, full left, full right, neutral. Recall says FMC message, but there is no FMC message. Okay, so we got a bug there. Before taxi checklist, APU selector, off, auto brake selector, RTO, takeoff flaps, that is 10 required and 10 set. Taxi light switch coming on before taxi checklist. Look at how much better the frame rates are as soon as GSX is dead. Always incredible. Okay, we're clear on the left and we're clear on the right. Let's go. I still need to get used to how much oversteering you actually need on the 747. I haven't flown very much in the recent days. But one thing I do notice is that with a strong tiller input, the plane is still slowing down really rapidly in a turn. So keep that in mind. You may want to apply a little bit of thrust before you actually start turning. By the way, if that is realistic or not is something that obviously I don't have direct experience with, as I've never flown 747. However, if I can give any comment on that based on my 737 knowledge, then it is probably not realistic. Here on the left, here on the right. Something you can do to help your turns is just use a little bit more thrust on the outside engine, a little bit less on the inside engine, like this. Let's see how are we doing. Well, could have been worse. It could have been worse. It's just a huge airplane that we're flying here. Really a huge airplane. Okay then, now that we've made it onto the straight line, we can go ahead into the takeoff briefing. This is going to be a left seat takeoff on runway 18, flaps 10, noise abatement procedure 2, takeoff speeds 138, 141, 161, and we're going to use Ernaf and Wiener for the takeoff, PAX auto bleeds on, sit straight ahead, climbing initially 4,000 feet, and we contact departure when advised by air traffic control. Now, we don't have any air traffic control right here, so we are simply going to assume a further climb clearance shortly after we get airborne. Apart from that, emergencies, we can proceed straight ahead 25 miles, MSA in the sector is 3,500 feet, and finally for our standard departure, straight ahead to Ried VOR after passing 800 feet, and we've got an initial speed limitation there of 220 knots. So that's something we will keep in mind and that we are going to adjust for. However, I do expect to be using speed in events, as air traffic control is probably going to give us an unrestricted climb. Now, I believe that's pretty much it for our departure briefing. I'm going to cut this corner a little bit here. I still find it quite unbelievable. When I'm looking outside, it seems like we are so slow, and then I'm looking at the ground speed on the navigation display, and we're going at 31 knots over here. Technically speaking, 30 should be the limit. Now, if we're going a tiny bit faster, nobody's going to complain, but we shouldn't overdo things. I did notice a little bit earlier that I taxied at 35 knots. That is definitely a little bit too fast. Okay, apart from that, however, it looks pretty good, so we can line up on runway 18 when we get to it. Now, some people say they find it a little bit hard to actually find that runway based on just looking outside. It's quite easy, because the runway is behind the blast fences over there. So that's how you can easily find your runway at Frankfurt. Okay, and with that, we are pretty much ready to go. Let's perform the lineup items. And use the checklist to see what we forgot. So, flight controls, checked, VNAV climb page, not applicable, engine anti-ice, auto, strobe light switch on, landing light switch on, TARA, P4 takeoff checklist complete. Hey, I probably overturned once again. But a little bit of thrust on the outboard engines. And we got the roll yaw asymmetry alert again. Probably not entirely correctly simulated there, but look at that. Once my engines are back down in idle thrust, the thing, or the alert goes away. Okay, with that, I would say we are pretty much ready to go. On my last video, I couldn't find the toga switch. Now, a couple of you guys have been very helpful there finding it, so toga switch is actually down here. Take off. That was me pulling thrust levers down, sorry for that. That is me pulling them too far up. 80 knots. V1. Rotate. Rotates very nicely, I have to say. Very, very nicely. Positive rate. Gear up. Now that we are well clear of the runway, we can pitch up a little bit more. Okay, and once we're airborne, flies like a charm. Let's get the autopilot in, and then we'll see how the autopilot's gonna handle things. So, flap 5. Speed check flap 5. Flaps 1. Speed check flap 1. And at this point, as mentioned, let's assume air traffic control gives us an unrestricted climb, so plug up and flaps up. Speed checked, flaps up. Final flight level 110. We are seeing flaps up no lights. A little bit of a nice rate of climb there, but it's also pulling out a little bit of speed, so that should hopefully come back any moment. Standard, passing 5.7, climbing 110. Yeah, 5,000 feet a minute is definitely nice, but keep in mind we're flying a huge airplane and we're doing so on a very short sector, so we are far below the maximum takeoff weight. If you look at this, currently at 280 tons, and the max takeoff weight of the airplane would be something around 450, so almost 200 tons there. Okay, approaching a couple of clouds, temperature plus 11, plus 10 now, engine anti-ice on. Okay, all the way up to cruising level, 390. I'm just keeping the speed back at 250 for a tiny bit until we are certainly well clear of those clouds. After all, especially the top of the clouds usually contains a bit of turbulence as well, and we want to save our passengers from that. So, passing 10,000, the lights can come off. Now it looks quite clear to me as well. Let's take the seatbelt off. We trust the airplane that it's not going to overcomplicate things when it is going to eventually pitch down. And then we will just about delete the speed restriction over here and read, execute that. And with the speed restriction gone, we can close our speed window, start accelerating. Also, I just about noticed that the pitching moment of the plane is quite improved over the previous version, so it lowered the nose in a nice and gentle way, especially that we have just released our seatbelt signs, so passengers are not going to fly around in the cabin. Apart from that, I would say we are well under our way, and I see you all as we start our descent towards Palma. Okay, we are back over here and we actually have an interesting development. Looks like, while we've been cruising along, our engine number one thought like, hey, I've had it, I'm gonna turn off. We actually got an engine failure on the engine number one. Now, that gets me wondering, however, what actually caused that engine failure. Because as far as I'm aware, we are running dry air engines. Okay? This is an interesting behavior here. So, looking at our fuel tank configuration, normally we should be seeing green lines over here indicating where the different fuel levels are coming from. Now, the way it looks like over here, we do have fuel available. So we got fuel in the main tanks, number 2 and 3, but the main tanks 1 and 4 have actually run dry. The good thing to see, however, is that as you can see, the plane just flies along and, well, nothing happens. It is perfectly capable of flying along on 3 engines. Now, what is surprising for me, however, is the reason why engine number 1 failed. Obviously, main tank 1 has run dry, which should not have happened. However, the thrust feed valve seems open, so fuel from the main tank number 2 should be feeding engine number 1, just like fuel from the main tank number 3 seems to be feeding engine number 4 at the moment. It is interesting to note that this stuff is happening at the moment, because I just loaded my fuel up using the weight and balance menu. So apparently that leads to fuel not being loaded up in a well, orderly fashion. Also, what's notable over here is we've got the reserve tanks, number 2 and 3, currently loaded up 100%. But why fuel isn't transferred from the reserve tanks into main tanks is something that I am not 100% sure about. Well, nonetheless, we might just about want to click on the override pump, see if that makes some sort of a difference. I do seem to remember that you shouldn't need them, but I just want to play around with this a little bit. What if we flick those on? Can we get the fuel from the reserve tanks to be used in any way, actually? Or is that fuel just stuck and lost back there? In any case, let's see if we can restart engine number 1. I don't have any 747 QRH available over here, so what we'll just do is number 1, confirm, cut off. Let's have it run down properly. And they actually stopped over there. But those don't seem to be doing anything, so start on number 1. Pull, and number 1, fuel switch to run. Auto throttle disconnect. It's noted, so we'll have to control our speed manually. Let's see if the auto start sequence is going to work, if we're going to get any fuel flowing. And it looks like the engine is actually starting normally. Still got an engine 1 oil temperature warning there. But I guess that's probably going to go away as the temperature rises during the engine start. Engine is showing running. Let's see if we can get some thrust on it. Yes, we can. Okay, the engine seems to be fully operational. Let's bring it up to the level of the others, and can put the auto throttle back in. Okay, back in the VNAV, we got the speed mode on. And with that, the auto throttle is back operational, and the thing is solved. However, it is quite unfortunate that we do have the fuel imbalance over here, because that seems to be a bug with the present version of the airplane there. So that's something to keep in mind if you're flying this aircraft. If you have a look at the fuel levels, it looks like the associated cautions and warnings are not showing either, so that's definitely something to have an eye on. Apart from that, something else that I want to have an eye on, even though we are showing a total fuel quantity, which is more than adequate for the flight, if we are not able to make use of the fuel in the reserve tanks, that means we are stuck with about 6 tons of fuel there. Now if we have a look at the engine displays, we're using, 1.8 per side, so 3.6 per hour. And that is again times 2, so we have fuel left for less than an hour of flight if we are unable to use the fuel in the reserve tanks. So that is something to have in mind here, that we should better not take any extra routings over there. Okay then, well, that was a little bit interesting. Something else that I noticed while I'm just about looking at it, cabin altitude 17,900, that is certainly not supposed to be. Should be somewhere in the region of about 8,000. So it looks like the cabin pressurization system that they've just added still is a little bit buggy there. Okay, well, so be it. What's really interesting is that engine number 1 quit when the number 1 main tank ran dry, but engine number 4 didn't, because that tank is also dry. So that's something that doesn't make sense to me yet, but I don't know, maybe there was a little bit of time difference there when the failure happened, where the fuel transfer valves opened, even though they are manually set to open it. I don't think the 747 has an auto position there. But anyway, With that situation over, let's quickly go ahead and back into the FMC there and start setting up for arrival. Okay, here we go. That's our setup completed. Let's go ahead and run the descent checklist, and then I'll quickly talk you over our plan for the arrival. Auto brake selector, level 3, anti-ice, auto, altimeters are actually not pre-selected that yet. That is something we can still do. And the local QNH is 1014. Like this. Okay, altimeters set, descent checklist complete. So let's quickly talk about what we're gonna do over at Palma. We are following the Lunik to Juliet arrival, which basically leads us around to the south of the island, and then via Mallorca, Vioar, Mike, Juliet, Victor, we'll basically fly ourselves onto the final. Runway 6 left it is. It is quite long. Well, for a 747, actually not all that long. It's 3,270 meter runway, so quite standard for Boeing 747 operations. And that's pretty much it. We're going to vacate to the right, and there's not too many stands where the 747 can park. And that's pretty much our approach briefing. So let's go ahead. Initially, we'll go down to 15,000, and then we can start our descent in a moment. Also, anticipating what the airplane might or might not do in the descent, let's go ahead, seatbelts on. Speaker selector is movable now. That is new with this version. Remember, in the last one it still didn't, so we're going to set it to below for the descent. And then we're going to trust our Tapa descent shortly, and then let's watch how smooth or not the airplane is going to start leaving its flight level. On the previous versions, things seem to be a little bit messed up there, so we'll see how things are going to be right now. And here we go. Looks quite alright. Definitely you can see that there's a huge improvement over there. However, what has deteriorated here is the target speed stability. So you can see how the how the magenta buck is moving up and down constantly. Now, in the real airplane, at least provided that the 747 is in any way similar to the 737, it can happen that the buck jumps up and down by about 1 knot. So that definitely does happen. However, what should not happen is that it moves as erratic as it does in the simulation right here. So that's probably something they are still going to improve with the future version. What's also interesting to see right now is that the speed is actually increasing above the target maximum speed. So that's a point where VNAV should interfere and should now... Yeah, we get the drag required VNAV message, that is good. But I'm not 100% sure if the plane should change from VNAV path to VNAV speed in order to maintain the speed there. Because that is something that I could imagine that the plane might have to do here. But in any case, now if you look at the wind, you can see previously it's been bumping up and down. But if you look at it right now, then you can actually see that things have stabilized, and now that the wind is stable, we can see how the target speed is also stable. Now, my theory for what is happening there is that the target speed in the descent is actually depending on the current wind conditions. And that is actually something that newer Boeing aircraft like the 737 MAX are doing as well. So in the MAX, the descent speed is varying depending on your weight and on the winds. So I could imagine that the same is the case in the 747 over here, and that since our wind has been quite erratic earlier, that led to the speed target being erratic as well. At least that is my best course of explanation as to what might have been happening there. Okay, apart from that, things are looking quite good, and we should be able to see our destination Palma outside already. And indeed we can. We've got the Bay of Alcudia over here. It's a pity that they have runway 06 in use today. Runway 24 is such a lovely approach right over the bay and over the island at low level, while when you're going for runway 06 you're flying all the way around on the other side. However, the good thing approaching 06 is that every now and then there is an aircraft carrier that's being replenished at Mallorca, and that aircraft carrier is usually anchoring right on the extended center line of the runway in Mallorca. One of my first approaches there was runway 06, and there was an aircraft carrier that had its deck lined up exactly with the runway, just 1 mile prior to the runway. So you basically flew over that carrier at 100 feet altitude. Sorry, at 300 feet altitude. That was just amazing. You know, somewhere in the very far back of your head you thought like, well, should I just do a touch and go on that carrier and then land it straight into Palma? But if you did that, you'd probably have to run. And very fast. And since you're on an island, you're not gonna get anywhere anyway. In any case, that's one of my favorite stories, flying to Mallorca in real life. Something we can do, however, that they do like to do in real life as well, at least provided that there really is no other traffic around, especially no departures, because as you can see we are crossing on the extended center line of the airport over here. Something that sometimes happens if it's early morning, you're the first one, going direct to Mike Jude Victor VR, and we are just about going to do exactly that. Primary reason I'm taking that shortcut is because it is actually going to put us high on the profile. Or so it should. I have no idea why we're being low right now. Up with the direct once more. See what VNAV is going to do. We've got 68 miles to run. Let's do a little bit of mental calculations here. So we're at 24,800. Why is my speed dropping? That stuff doesn't make sense. Level change, please. That'll change to 80. Thank you. So let's do a bit of mathematics. 25,000 feet times 3 means we have to be in a 75 nautical miles to run. 75 miles with 66 right now, so I don't know what VNF is calculating, but it does absolutely not seem correct to me. On the other hand side, this plane is descending so incredibly well, but doesn't matter, we're just gonna do stuff ourselves, which gives us the opportunity to explore the flight model a little bit more. So, while we're on it, why don't we just about go ahead and disconnect the automatics and see how the plane flies manually. Right, autopilot is off. I'm going to keep the control color a little bit in view here. Unfortunately, it makes the panel really dark because it's so bright outside with the clouds, but nonetheless, let's just about go ahead and do a little bit of maneuvering left and right just to see how the airplane behaves. So let's go a little bit up and down. Something that I always noticed with Boeing 747 add-ons in earlier simulators is that they were very, very unresponsive. So you needed really, really strong control inputs. You know, in order to achieve a roll rate like this, you would have to do something like this on the control column. And that is something that I never found right. People always said like, yeah, it's the airplane that weighs so much, so because your airplane is so heavy, it would need such a strong control input. But that is something that I never personally agreed with, because, you know, Boeing designs the airplane for the weights at which it is flying. So you would think that if they don't have sufficient control authority on the ailerons or on the elevator, they would simply put in more effective ailerons, or elevators for that matter. So I never quite agreed with those very, very strong inputs required on some flight models on past 747 add-ons. Now, then again, I've never flown a 747, so I don't know what it actually feels like. But at least in this one, things seem to be quite a bit easier. So if you look at that, I'm doing a minor input, the plane is quite responsive to that, and it just feels about right. That is what I have to say about that manual control handling, that exercise that we've just done. Okay, so with that completed, let's put the autopilot back in. By the way, something you may or may not have noticed is that whenever I press a single one of those autopilot buttons, all 3 of them light up. Now that's obviously not supposed to happen. So only for an auto land, all 3 of them should light up at the same time. But as long as you don't have the approach mode armed, that shouldn't happen, because you're basically flying it on a single autopilot, and not all 3 at the same time, except for when you come in for an auto landing. Okay, there's our airport over there. Let's see that from the outside. Beautiful airplane, isn't it? Really beautiful airplane. So we seem to be coming back onto the VNAV path there. The target speed for the VNAV descent is still 311 in here. I'm going to change that towards 280. Invalid entry. Why is that? 280. That's interesting. That's certainly not meant to be. What happens if I insert that mark number as well? Okay, that works. Well, that's a bug then. You should definitely be able to enter just the speed without having to put in the mark number as well. Okay, we're going to continue our descent. Next up is going to be 3,000 feet, which is basically the altitude for Mike Julie Victor VOR. Same time, I'm just going to switch back to VNAV. VNAV speed 222 knots. That doesn't seem right. What does it say in here? Nothing the likes. Okay, this doesn't make sense. I don't know why it's doing this. Maybe the speed target is going to come back up by the time we are back on the VNAV path? But you know what? Let's go speed and event. 240. So they still need to do a little bit more work on the VNAV profile over there. That is definitely not correct at the moment. Like when you're so close to the path, it should use a little bit of thrust there in order to give you the opportunity to get back onto the VNAV path. The way those big Boeings are designed is basically they should go into hold mode, not in idle, and they should select a thrust for about 1,250 feet per minute downwards. And then the pilot can adjust the thrust as needed in order to re-intercept the path. So let's just presume that idle mode wasn't active here. Let's see if we can actually enter any thrust manually. Yeah, I can. Okay, let's do that. Give it a bit of thrust, and that should fly it right back into the path. Here we go, VNAV path. And now idle becomes the overriding mode once again. You can see how the thrust levers went down, and like that we are now back onto the VNAV profile. Now we're seeing hold mode. That's okay. If I close my speed window, it's still giving me 222 knots. That doesn't make sense. So I'm just about going to open the speed window again towards 240 knots. Past 10,000, so the lights can go on, and we can set altimeter 1014. Passing 7.60 and 3,000. This is strange behavior, like why did the path jump off so much? I don't see any reason why it should have done that. Okay, passing Mike Juliet Victor down to 1,900. At this point they would either vector you into the final or just let you fly outbound on heading 240 and then vector you to the final. So that's typically what they do here in Palma. So that's Palma itself over there. That's the city. We will try and avoid that as best as possible. And time for the approach checklist. Landing light switches. On. Seatbelt selector. On. Approach checklist complete. Okay, let's start getting our speed back. Manage speed. Flaps 1. Speed checked. You've got some huge flap limit speeds over there. As you can see, 285 for flap 1, 265 flap 5. That's just because when you're close to maximum takeoff weight, this airplane really needs speed. You can have a clean speed in the region of around 280 knots with this when you're close to the max takeoff weight. Okay, and flap 5 please. Eject. It is coming back. I wonder why the target speed is jumping below the speed bug. it shouldn't do that. Or below the flap maneuvering speed. Okay, glide slope is coming in.
Bank angle, bank angle.
Oh, that's interesting.
Bank angle, bank angle.
Yeah, it's slightly past 30.
Bank angle, bank angle.
And it's decelerating below the flap reference speed. Okay, flaps 10 then.
Bank angle, bank angle.
Looks like VNAV is going too slow here. We don't want it to do that, so let's correct for that ourselves. That's interesting, the bank angle call out there. I do not know why it did that. Normally, bank angle should sound above 35 degrees. When I just looked at it and while I said it, it occurred to me like maybe it said it because we were past 25 degrees. Maybe they got a typo in the code there. At least that's something I could imagine. Would be typical flight simulation to encounter something like that. Approach is armed. Obviously the approach light should line up and not the localizer light, so a little bug over there. So VNAV brought us very nicely onto the glide slope there, and we've got localizer capture and glide slope capture. Okay, runway heading set. Get down, flaps 20. I'm just going to configure a little bit earlier right now, because I want the chance to hand fly the plane a little bit later on the approach, without having to worry about all the checklists and stuff like that. So that's the speed brake count, even though we don't get the memo, which is interesting. Anyway, the speed breakers are armed now. Flaps 30. Speed checked. Let's assume landing clearance is given already. Taxi lights coming on. And the landing checklist, please. So, landing gear, down, speed brake lever, armed, flap in. 30. Set. Landing checklist complete. Terrain display unfortunately still is the default Asobo stuff, which is far from realistic, but I guess we just gotta live with it. So, auto throttle off. You got it, speed brake armed. Doesn't seem to work perfect though. And the autopilot is off. Okay, all manual, let's get the feeling for the plane, and then we bring it down onto 06 left. That sound, what you hear there, is coming whenever I'm trimming, so I don't know why they added a sound like that to it. Doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to actually have trim sound there at all. Okay, 1000 is checked, and we are stabilized. It might just be a feeling of myself, but I have a feeling that the nose is drifting a little bit left and right here, together with the wind. It seems to be a little bit of an overdone effect, but I guess that's probably to be blamed on the default simulator, the weather engine, and not directly on the airplane. Continue. Was it me or did the approaching minimums call not play?
200.
50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
Okay, and we are down. We've got the speed brake up, reverse normal, manual brakes. Okay, out of reverse. The one good thing, flying a heavy, is that they need 5 miles separation right behind you. In other words, you are not going to block the runway for anybody immediately behind you, just because you get a little bit slower when rolling out. However, they still might try to get somebody airborne behind you, so that's something to keep in mind. Okay, and with that, welcome to Palma de Mallorca Airport. Now comes the most interesting part here, taxiing a 747 on an airport that is definitely not immediately built for one. However, I do know that even in the past, airlines did fly here on 747s, and I do know Lufthansa does it as well. There is a really interesting documentary out there on YouTube, by the way, a cockpit documentary of Lufthansa flying the 747 over here to Palma. So that is something that I can absolutely recommend everybody of you to have a look at, as it's really fascinating to see how they handle such a big airplane on such a small airport. This, by the way, up here is the only stand where we are actually going to fit into. There is no terminal parking position that would handle our 747-8. There were some that I believe could handle some of the older and smaller 747s, like the 400 series or even the 200s, but as far as I know, since the Dash 8 has larger wings, those actually don't fit onto the main terminal anymore. Normally when you see heavies at Mallorca, the 50s is where those are parking, but not in the 747. Just look at how much thrust I'm using in order to get the airplane around those corners. So here we go. I'm actually helping it with asymmetrical thrust to get around the corner. So, how are we going to park over here? Looks like we go straight in and then over to the left. So self-maneuvering stand in a 747. I love it. Absolutely love it. Unfortunately though, this is a full tiller input, so looks like we may be a little bit limited here. But that's just going to make things even more exciting. Okay, so take it up to the line. Now let's have a good look outside. And around the corner we go. I wish we could see the marshaller. Unfortunately we can't. But this should be roughly it. Okay. Plane stopped. Parking brake set. APU running. APU generator online. So, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, that's interesting. The squawk resetted itself to 0. I don't think it should do that. Normally you're required to maintain your squawk while taxiing. So we're below 20%. And with that set, we can put on the external power, thank you. So let's run the shutdown checklist and then we'll see how I actually parked that airplane. So, shutdown checks. Landing light switches off, taxi light switch off, throttle's idle, park brake set, seatbelt selector off, anti-ice auto, fuel flow, cut off, beacon light off, shutdown checklist complete. Okay, so let's get GSX to start our deboarding and see if that's actually going to handle the doors. Yeah, Ryanair, surely not. Let's take a Swissport. Okay, so let's see, how did I park that airplane? Well, that is alright. Could have been a little bit further forward, but very, very hard to actually judge how far you are in this plane. So, that's gonna be that. Alright, so, first impression of that 747, it is a lovely little airplane, absolutely is. So, we'll see how that is going to develop with the further updates. But we certainly see some improvement on that first update for the aircraft and avionics beta, and I'm sure that there will be further improvements as we go along down the road. In any case, it is a very promising thing, and I can only encourage every one of you who is interested to give it a try, as you are certainly going to enjoy it. For now, thank you very much for watching, and if you liked what I did, then like, comment, and subscribe. And if you really like the channel, I would appreciate to see you as a channel member, which is going to give you exclusive early access to new videos before they are released for everyone else. Thank you for watching, and I'm looking forward to see you all again, hopefully very soon.